and I will begin. Okay, so I hope this works. I'm actually in the middle of the desert, in the middle of a wedding, which I left to join your shiur. So I'm very glad it worked. It was scheduled that I have the shiur. I didn't know if I was going to make the wedding, and now we're trying to do. There's actually a something that term in Hebrew you say you can't dance at two weddings at the same time. Lo rokdim, right, v'shtei chatunot. You can't be at two at the same time, but here we're having a shiur and a wedding at the same time. So let's hope that it works. So fantastic to see you, and Bezrat Hashem, we will have a very nice shiur. And as always, you're very welcome to join in, to ask, to comment, to disrupt, to argue. That's what learning Torah is about. So you are all very welcome. So this, I would like to focus this week on one of the subjects that we have. This week's parasha, upcoming parasha, Behar, begins by talking about the sabbatical year, about the Shemitah, which we'll talk about soon. And Rav Shmuel will bring a Midrash about that. But if we scroll down a bit, I would like to start from the passage, and then we'll come back to this Midrash. So if you go to the second source, please. Here we go. Okay. So the passage in Leviticus in Vayikra, we need to, no, we need to go back up. We're at the right one at the bottom of the previous page. A bit more. There we go. Stop. Thank you. Okay. So the passage says as follows. If your kin be in straits, come under your authority, and are held by you as though resident aliens, let them live by your side. It's not only the English translation which is difficult, but the original Lashon HaKodesh, the wording in the Torah is very it's not simple wording. V'chiyamuch achicha umata yado imach v'chezakta bo ger v'toshav v'chai imach. Does anyone have any idea what this is? A commandment to us that we're supposed to follow. We can read it again in English. If your kin be in straits, come under your authority and are held by you as though resident aliens, let them live by your side. Anyone have any idea what what the Torah is talking about here? Anyone, please? So I'm gonna try to let's try to understand the pasuk before we go into any of the midrashim. How does how does your brother come under your authority? Anyone have any idea? What that can mean? How can you rule over someone else who is your brother? Yes?
Could it be if, for example, because it says in straits as well, so by some way, sorry, I'm finding words are difficult. So they come either as a slave, maybe, or like what is kin? Is it family, or is it someone like? Is it family by blood, or is it family like Jewish family? Is my question actually.
So right, so very good question. So achicha means and we can say an Israelite, right? Someone who is Jewish, not your sibling, but rather someone who is your brother because he's part of Am Yisrael. Okay? So what is your suggestion then?
My suggestion is if someone comes to you in a moment of disarray, and or else like under your service, or if you are also ruling from somewhere from different land and comes as it says resident aliens, um, they should live as equals with you.
Okay, thank you very much. So basically, we have a situation which the Torah is talking about in the future, because when Am Yisrael are in the desert, so they're all equals, right? They're all a part of the tribes. But when they come in, the Torah says there will come a point in which people will not be equals for economic reasons, right? Because someone, if for example, someone we know in the Torah, someone steals something from a Jewish person, steals from you, then if he doesn't have how to pay back, he becomes a slave. In other words, what does a slave mean? A slave means that he is now your servant to pay off the debt for what he stole from you, for example. Or you can have someone in general, like you were saying, right, that um, has just come under you in some way, then the Torah is very strict and says that you must let them live by your side. In other words, that you have an obligation to make sure that that person does not feel unequal in any sense, despite the fact, right? Despite the fact that that person is um, economically in a misfortune, in a situation in which he actually needs your help or is under you. I'm just thinking of this. Many years ago, we spent some time in India, and living there, you get to know very closely the caste system in which someone is born into um, an economical circle that he or she can never live in their life. So if you're born into the higher one in the hierarchy, then you own the other people basically, and someone else. Doesn't matter how much they work there and how hard they work, they will never have the opportunity to be equal to the other. So here the Torah is very aware that there are systems like that in the world, and that, right, we cannot uphold such a system. That it's a demand for socialism at a certain level, and we can discuss that. That it be right. That we have equality for all and that we care for each other, which is our opening for this shiur. Rav Shmuel, you joined us now, so maybe take this from this pasuk back to the Shemitah, and then we'll go forward.
Okay, well, thank you, Moshe-David, for taking over. I had some issues. Baruch Hashem, great to be here again. So the two parashat we have, and especially the first parashat, Parashat Behar, discusses Shemitah. Now, Shemitah is the seventh year, and the Torah tells us that the land has to lie fallow. The land, you're not allowed to work the land during the Shemitah. Now, sorry, just wait a second, please. Sorry. So that's a mitzvah. The mitzvah to let the land lie fallow. And the text I wanted to share with you here is going to talk about what are the implications, maybe on a moral, philosophical level. And then, as we'll see later, this has also got a lot of societal, even economical effects. So let's maybe start and look at the first source, please, if I can see the beginning of it. This source is not actually specifically on this parasha, interestingly enough. It's at the beginning of the book of Vayikra. And the text says, Gibore Koach Ose Devaro. The text says that it's starting actually by explaining a verse in Tehillim, in the Psalms. It says there, talks about those who are strong-willed, strong-minded, who have gvura, who have courage and strength, and who do the will of God. And I didn't bring you the beginning of the Midrash because it's not relevant to our discussion, but there it actually discusses different possibilities how to translate it. Maybe it refers to angels, it might refer to different things. It's not clear at all, according to the rabbis, what does it refer to. But here, the Midrash has an interesting suggestion. Gibore koach oseh devaro, mighty in strength to perform his bidding. Regarding whom is the verse speaking? Rabbi Yitzchak said, the verse is speaking of those who observe the Shabbatical year, the Shomrei Shvi'it. Okay, by the way, interesting, even today I've seen this is often used in that context. In Israel, there's a lot of discussions every year, every seventh year, big discussions in Israel. What do we do with the Shemitah? And some people keep it very strictly, and some people rely on certain leniencies, which we're not going to go now. This is not a shiur of halacha, but this is one of the big discussions. And often people who are proud that they keep Shemitah, they often use about themselves, so other people use about them the term Gibore Koach. Those are strong, who are like courageous with strength. Okay, so why would they be more courageous? There are many ways you can show courage. Why Shemitah? Because it says the way of the world is that the person performs a mitzvah for 1 day, for 1 week, for 1 month. But does one do so for the rest of the days of the year? Yet this one sees his field fallow, his vineyard fallow, and pays his land tax and remains silent. Okay, this is obviously context specific. Arnona, land tax, is something that's often discussed in the Talmud. Different times in history worked in different ways. But the point is you're paying a tax, but you're not able to work the land. Yeah? So is there anyone mightier than that? If you say that this, then it goes into a bit of, sorry? If you say that...
It's very interesting. Yeah, so it's very interesting, the land tax, that in other words, that's not a tax by the Jewish authority. They wouldn't tax during the Shemitah. It was a tax by the Romans during this time. I think is the reference, because you wouldn't tax someone who is keeping the Shemitah, because he doesn't. The tax is a reference, I think, to the Romans who were taking the tax, despite it being the Shemitah. And there was actually Roman legislation under some of the Caesars that gave them exemption from that tax because of their understanding of the Shemitah. So just a note on that.
Okay, thank you. No, that really helps us understand the historical context here. And is there anybody who's more of a mightier than that? And then it goes a bit of a Talmudic discussion. Is there anyone? If you say it is not speaking of those who observe the sabbatical year, it is stated here who perform his bidding, devaro. And it's stated there, this is the matter, davar, of the sabbatical year. So this is classic style of explaining the Tanakh or the Torah. One of the different ways which our sages had a tradition could be used to lidrosh, to expound on the Torah, which is called a gzera shava, where you have one word in one verse and the same word in another verse somewhere else in the Tanakh or in the Torah. And they had a tradition that these two were connected. So we have the word davar in Shemitah and the word davar in this Gibore Koach, or say dvaro, davar, so there's a connection between them. So I think there's quite a few points here. Here, the Shemitah in general is often brought as an example of the Torah's authenticity. right? Because it's not a law that is benefiting the landowners. It's actually a law that's on the surface, at least, seems to be a very difficult law to keep. Yeah, of course, we know that it's healthy for the ground nowadays. We know that healthy for the ground to rest and so on. But to have the whole Jewish people in the land of Israel not working the land for a whole year is economically a very risky thing to do. And the only reason why we could do it is because we trust what it says in the Torah, that in the 6th year, Hashem will bless the land and give it everything that you want. So that's one of the things that often brought in many books, like to see the Torah is from God, because who else would give such a law? Because who else can promise that there will be such a good crop in the 6th year that you will not need to work the land the 7th? Now, this Midrash is very interesting because he's not putting the praise, so to say, on God. It's concerning the person. The person here, he is a gibor. He is a mighty person. And I cannot help but think of a different, completely different part of Talmud in Pirkei Avot. Before we started this series, if you remember last year, we did Pirkei Avot. And there we have this sentence, who is the gibor? Who is the mighty man? HaKovesh et Yitzro, the man who controls his evil inclination. And I thought that fits so nicely into this Midrash, because here we're saying the Gibor is not the strong man, he's not the fighter, as usually you would translate a mighty person, a warrior, a hero. The hero is the person who day in, day out, one day, week, month, year, holds on to his emunah, holds on to his faith. That's actually something I thought was fascinating, that emunah, we can all have flashes of emunah. We can all have moments when we feel very inspired. But this person who keeps a Shemitah, it's not, he needs to hold on to it day after day. And it doesn't, the blessing doesn't always seem to be coming. And there's definitely times when you feel like I could gain by working this year the land, and still you hold on to it and you keep what the Torah says. So I think this is a very interesting definition of Gibor. It's interesting how the Midrash felt was so important to prove from verses that this is what Gibor really means. The Gibor is the person who has faith and who keeps to the rule, even even if it prolongs for a long time, he doesn't see immediately the reward for this big mitzvah. So I think this Midrash is really opening the door to looking at Shemitah in terms of emunah, of trust, faith, and in terms of being consistent in our service of God, consistent in what you do, and continuing, and not just so to say be inspired by special moments. This is what comes to my mind when I read this Midrash. I'm very happy to hear what you have, Moshe-David, and also anybody in the group.
I think that your comparison to Pirkei Avot is interesting, and that the idea of Gibor, being a hero according to Chazal, is many times something that you are strong enough not to do, to keep yourself from doing rather than doing. In other words, in the world that we live, and I think this is we can feel this tension a bit with you can say the reconfiguration of what does it mean to be Jewish in the establishment of the state of Israel. That many times they started looking for heroes, and Bar Kokhba became the Zionist hero, for example, and you the Yom HaShoah, the Holocaust Memorial Day was set at the and not when it's not when it's commemorated on January 27th, which was the when the Allies freed Auschwitz, but rather on the day that the rebels in the Warsaw Ghetto, the uprising, began. So there's a narrative saying who we need to, there was even the terminology was used, we will create a new Jewish identity, which means we are no longer the exiled Jew and we are heroes. And I think that it took some time. I think that, and that sort of pushed aside everything before to say that everything before was exile and and just acceptance. Whereas if we look at it in this way, the idea of Gibor is something, it's an inner strength, an inner power to know what is right and to stay fast and to hold on to it. And in that sense, some years ago, I was involved in a new section in Yad Vashem, in which they started bringing forward stories of Hasidic rabbis, for example, and a cheder, for example, of kids that were learning in the ghetto, and these were the new heroes because it brought forward that to have the inner strength doesn't mean that strength is only something external, but rather something internal as well. And I find it very interesting here that that it's really difficult, as you said, of Shmuel, to day after day, your kids might even be hungry. And saying to you, you're not plowing the fields. And it's not only the seventh year. If you don't plow, then you're not going to have the next year, right? You're not going to have food on the table. And it's very, very difficult to have that emunah and to say, no, I have the faith and I know that this is the right thing. But also that it's not only about the land, it's not about only you not working the land, it's the relation to the land itself, which is a reminder to us, like the Shabbat, that yes, we can work for 6 years, but at the end, the blessing of the land is not up to us. And it's how we treat the land and how we treat each other through the land as well. So you have all of the mitzvot that are throughout the 6 years of work of caring for the other, which I think really connects to the other to the following midrashim that we will see soon. But I think that the Shemitah really brings forward, and for many years this Gvura was forgotten. It says that the year of the destruction of the temple was the year of the Shemitah, and that one of the reasons was that it wasn't kept properly. And then coming back to the land, it actually made some rabbis quite nervous. In other words, how are we going to do this properly? We haven't done it for 2,000 years. How are we going to know how to keep the Shemitah properly? And what about those who don't keep, right, won't respect the land? Will that bring destruction upon us again? So there was a lot of discussion back, all the way back 150 years ago, began discussions about how are we going to deal with the Shemitah in the modern world, and is it even possible to do so? So it's fascinating. But the idea of Gvura, which is very relevant today, because you see stories of Gvura, which are not only the tremendous stories of Gvura of the soldiers, risking their lives and people sacrificing their lives for each other in this war that we are in, but also the stories of Rachel who has become a national hero, who cooked, I'm sure you know the story, who cooked cakes and cookies for for the terrorists in her home, um, long enough, and kept chatting with them in Arabic until the IDF showed up and saved her. So that's tremendous gvura, to be able to cook cookies, like bake cookies with terrorists in your home, just to have that just once. But also the amazing stories of those hours and hours that went on, and people just being there for each other, is also a deep sense of gvura, right? So wait, turn I need to turn on my car. Okay. Um, so Anyone else before we go forward? Any other comments before we go forward in any of the Midrashim? What does, right? Do you have any examples of Gvura which resonate with this Midrash? Okay, so if anyone thinks of a story they'd like to share, you're very welcome. But we have some more midrashim that we're going to go through. So if you could, yes, Liora.
So like
Agam Bergen.
yeah, keeping Shabbat while in captivity, for example.
Yeah, you have right. I think that it's a you have the stories of the amazing women who were in a captivity and kept Shabbat and kept Pesach and kept the fasts and fasted when they had no, and it's like stories from that are living stories today that are just amazing, and you see that even from their own accounts, the Hamas terrorists had respect for that. They had respect because this is real gvura. This is to have that inner strength to be able um, to be like that and to be strong about it and not cook on Shabbat, right? Because even if you have no food or hardly any food, and to fast because it's Yom Kippur, and amazing, amazing stories that really I think give strength. It's not only the inner strength that they have; it's the strength that they give all of us to be able to, right? And even right um, the Eurovision contest this week for someone to, come out of the Nova Festival and show the world that inner power that you have to just come out and share the light. It's not about tragedy. It's not victimization. It's saying we have the power to get beyond um, what they have done to us, which is amazing, amazing statement. And you see that at the end of the day, with all of this discrimination and everything, that the judges gave minimal votes, but we would, Israel would have been in first place if it was up to the world to vote without the judges. So it's really incredible to see that. So thank you for bringing it forward to these days. Thank you very much. Let's go down a bit. Um, yes, someone else wanted to join? Say something? Okay, let's continue. So let's talk about what does it mean going back to this idea of caring for the other and for equality. What happens? How do we deal with someone else who is in a bad state? And I think to talk nice about caring for someone else is a nice notion, and maybe we can all agree. But when it comes to the fact that you have someone who's really in a bad state, it's not so easy sometimes to reach out and to care for them. And you have someone who walks in, a beggar walks into a wedding, and it was I was at yesterday at such an event that someone just an engagement party for my nephew, and someone just walked into the middle, uninvited, and asked for help. And sometimes it's not so nice, right? The person doesn't. It's nicer to give to someone who's dressed fancy and everything, but this person really needs your help. So I think the Torah is trying to, and through the Midrashim, we'll see how are we supposed to train ourselves to act towards the other and find a way to treat each person with equality in whatever state they are. So there's different angles to look at it. So let's look at this Midrash. Is anyone willing to read this one for us? Anyone, please? No volunteers today? Okay. Rabbi Tanhum ben Rabbi Chia began. It says in the book of Kohelet, the Shlomo HaMelech says as follows, King Solomon, on a day of good, enjoy, and on a day of bad, see. ביום טובה היה וטוב, וביום רעה ראה. God made this corresponding to that. גם את זה לעומת זה עשה אלוהים. So, right, there is something, King Solomon tells us, first of all, recognize the fact that there is something called a good day and a bad day. Someone asks you, how are you doing? You can say, well, today's not the best of days. I'm having a difficulty. I'm having a challenge. That in itself, don't fake it and think and say, oh, everything is great. There's something called a good day and a bad day. Doesn't mean you don't have faith to say this isn't the best day ever. But then, what does it say? If before misfortune befell another, see how you can benefit him and sustain him in order to receive reward. So would Reb Tanchum ben Rabbi Chia do when his mother would purchase a litra of meat from the market. She would purchase two for him, one for him and one for the poor, on the basis of this corresponding to that. The Holy One, blessed be He, made the poor and the wealthy so they could benefit each other. Therefore, Moses cautions them, if your brother will become poor. So basically, the Midrash is taking it and saying it's not, even when you have a good day, you should always keep in mind that someone else is not. In other words, many times when we have a bad day, then that becomes our whole focus. But when we're having a good day, then it's great, and we can't understand or have empathy for someone who's not. Whereas Shlomo Melech says it's the opposite. If you're having, if you have the energy right now and everything is going well from you, you should realize that for someone else it's not. You know how that feels because you've had those days yourself. So use the positive energy that you have in order to reach out to someone else and say, okay, who's in need? Because I'm having the greatest day right now. When many times when you're having a good time, you want to surround yourself with good and you just want to feel you're at the top of the world. But maybe that's the time to make an effort and say, wait, Baruch Hashem, everything is going so well. Who can I reach out to right now and see that they're in need? So when you have, right, you have a responsibility to look out to the other and see how you can help someone else out and to help sustain him. In order for what? In order to receive reward. In other words, I don't know, because it says elsewhere that we shouldn't do things in order to receive reward. But here the point is that there's an opportunity for you, especially when it's good for you, to reach out to do good for someone else. And Rabbi Tanchum says, used to ask his mother, she would go and buy meat for him at the meat market, and he would ask for two portions, one for him and one for the poor people. And according to the halakha, there's no halakha that says we should give 50% of what we have to the poor. So he's giving much more than he was actually required or asked to. But what is he doing? He's giving, it's more about the motion that he's asking to do. He's saying, if I'm going out to get something for myself, at the same time, I need to make sure that someone else is taken care of. I'm taking something in for myself. Therefore, at the same time, I have to make sure I'm taking care of someone else. So why? Because it says this corresponding to this, that Hashem, everything in this world from the very beginning is, right, duality. It's two-sided. And therefore, if we only take care of the good, then the bad is not taken care of. But our opportunity is to use our moments of good to take care of the other as well. So therefore, that's how the pasuk understands the beginning of the Midrash understands the beginning of the passage, that when your brother is put down, when he's in a situation of need, that is the time for you to step forward and to care for him. So we see that when we talk about caring for the other, this is a very interesting way of looking at it, that we have a responsibility, but also opportunity, that the situation that we have been put in allows us to actually care for the other. Well, let's look down at another midrash, and we can see um, another perspective. Um, so, why is it important for us to care for the other? Is the question. In other words, I think one of the best basic questions that we can ask is, okay, I've worked very, I've worked my entire life. I worked very hard, and I worked hard in order to achieve what I have. If I hadn't worked so hard, I wouldn't be in the situation that I'm in. So I deserve what I have. Why does the fact that I worked so hard now mean that I have to care for someone who's maybe worked less? I see someone in the street. Do I have to step forward and care for them? I think this is something that we can sometimes feel. If they would have just gone to the effort that I went to in my life, they wouldn't be in the situation. So now I have the responsibility to care for them, right? It's a very basic question that we ask in terms of charity or caring for the other in general. Why is it that um, we should actually need to care? So the Midrash says as follows. It says in Yeshayahu, the passage says, Mishovev nitivot lashavet, restores of paths for habitation. Rabbi Yehuda ben Rabbi Shimon said, this poor person sits and says resentfully, how am I different from so and so? He sleeps on his bed, and I sleep here. So and so sleeps in his house, and I here. And you stood and gave to him. As you live, I will ascribe to you as though you made peace between me and him. In other words, the Midrash flips everything that I just said all around and says exactly the opposite, right? It says as follows. It's not that you are standing and saying, um, why should I care um, for him? Rather the opposite. Hashem has very open ears, it says, to the poor. And if you're sitting there in your house and enjoying your meal, and you passed by a poor person on the street and didn't care for them, then that will create judgment upon you. Because that poor person is sitting there, and we don't know the consequences that led that person to where he or she is. And we just go by because we have nothing to do with them, and then we sit and are eating our meal. And that poor person is going to cry and say to Hashem, why am I in such a situation? That this person goes and has his nice meal in his apartment, and I'm here on the street. That person goes and has his comfortable bed, and I have nothing. And Hashem says, you know what? That person is right. So if you don't care for that person, then you will end up in that same situation yourself because you don't deserve to have what you have. However, if you go and give to that person, Hashem says, "It's I will ascribe to you as if you brought peace between him and me." In other words, you have this person, this poor person sitting there on the street, is has no peace with Hashem, has no peace with God, because he's complaining and he has a just complaint. He's saying, God, you know what? I don't deserve it. And Hashem says, how am I going to help this person? But if you go and give to this person from what I gave to you, you have brought peace between me and him, which is an amazing statement. In other words, Hashem says it's not about you now giving to him and feeling good about yourself. And it's not about you giving to him in order to get reward, like the previous Midrash says. It's that you have the opportunity to bring peace between the poor person and God himself. And therefore, Hashem says that is a much higher credit that I give you for caring for that person, because you have brought peace between me and him. Rav Shmuel, you're welcome to, if you have anything you want to add.
Yeah, I was thinking that first of all, when it came to the first source, and you mentioned the emotion, I think that was very much a very important theme here is the emotion. Like you said, he's giving a lot more than halacha would require. He's bought a piece of meat and he's buying exactly the same size piece of meat for the poor. And actually, one could argue that halachically it might even be wrong to do that. The Talmud tells us very interestingly that a person should not give too much tzedakah. There's talk about not more than a fifth of your income, and there might be exceptions to that rule. But a person's main obligation is to look after his own family and his own needs, and not impoverish himself, because then he won't be able to function. But here, I think the point was, tzedakah is so much more than a mitzvah, and we can't look at tzedakah the way we look at tefillin, and the way we look at prohibition of mixing wool and linen or any other law in the Torah. I remember I had a Rebbe in Yeshiva who liked to quote the words of the Rambam in the Shmona Prakim, the 8 chapters, one of his famous books. And there he says there is differences between mitzvot. And when we're talking about mitzvot between man and his fellow, it's not enough to just do the mitzvah. A person has to get to a state of mind where he really cares about another person. And I think that is, to me, the key in that Midrash. The person is this rabbi is saying, how can I get meat for myself if I'm not getting it for somebody else? And I just thought that was very, very interesting. And also, you sort of see a bit of a continuation here, but here it's put the other way around. Here we're looking at the poor person's feelings and thoughts. How can why this person got that? I have something else. He's complaining to God, and you, the person who are managing, who has a bed, who has a house, tries to correct that injustice. So you saw like the difference and the so to say a different perspective. First Midrash was more about my mitzvah as of tzedakah, and this one is more about the poor person's feelings. But I actually think both of them are very much strengthening the same idea. You have to feel for the other. You have to care about the other. You have to put yourself in the other's position, which is ve'ahavta l'recha kamocha. It's very interesting. I was teaching a class to the students in Jewish school just a while ago, and one girl is very, very bothered. 15-year-old girl, very bothered by the whole concept of loving your fellow as yourself, and what does it mean, and how it doesn't make sense to her, and I don't like the same things as my fellow does, and who says that I love myself in the first place? But I think this is a very good example of what actually loving your fellow as yourself means. You put yourself in the other person's shoes. You feel bad if you're getting meat and somebody else is not getting meat, and sometimes that transcends the actual halachic details of what are your requirements with tzedakah. And I mean, I can say personally, I struggle with it sometimes, because tzedakah, especially nowadays, often it's just a bit of it's a mitzvah, it's a, I wouldn't say it's a technical thing, but it's a very mechanic thing. I go online and I see that I've got so and so much money that I can afford to give to tzedakah, and I see some causes and I click a button. But we have to remember tzedakah is also a feeling. That was just my thought.
But tzedakah,
sorry, I want to say that tzedakah have different levels. It's not only money. Tzedakah can be many things. So, yeah, I want to say this.
100% tikva, yes, and tzedakah can mean, right? The basis of the word tzedakah is actually justice, which means, right, it goes back to the idea of equality. But there's many tzedakah is money, and it can be food, it can be clothing, caring for the other. And the pasuk here talks about the inequality that you have to take care of, and then that opens a huge door to how do we do that? How do we take care of the other so that who is in a situation of being unequal? And of course, right, within social circles, that can be the case. Within a community, that can be the case, in which someone there just needs to an extra hand to feel equal and to feel that they are welcome. And it's sometimes small gestures that we can do that can be huge for someone else. And not only, like you're saying, Tikva, it's not only right, okay, I have right, I can click, like Rav Shmuel was saying. It's then maybe we can actually lose the essence of the mitzvah by saying, okay, we're doing it, we're checking our list, we gave tzedakah, which is very important, and there's special halachot telling us how we can give and who should we give, but there's the essence of it, which is caring for the other, which is like like Rav Shmuel was saying. Um, I'm reminded all the time, like all of us, of the situation of the hostages. And I was watching yesterday an interview with Yarden Bibas, who I'm sure you all know, um, the father of the Gingy, right? Right, the father of the red-haired, um, right, and the tragedy and him coming out all alone. So he hasn't agreed to be interviewed at all. And yesterday he gave an interview which he wanted to talk not about himself, but about his best friend, David, who's still hostage, David Konyo. And David's twin brother was in the interview with them. They all grew up together in Kfar Aza. They're best friends from age, from Kita Aleph. That's what he said. And that something that really resonates with what we're learning here is that both of them said that, every time they go to sleep, they can't sleep comfortable, because how could they sleep comfortable knowing that David is in that situation? Every time they eat, they think of the hostage being in that situation. And I think, without going into, very difficult, terrible details, but that sense of it is something that we carry and care, right? It says, Kol Yisrael arivim ze lezeh, that we all care for each other, that we are all there for each other. And even small things that we can do in that sense, it doesn't even mean that someone knows, but it means a lot just to say, well, that person, I have that person in mind. And it's very strong, even just now, is at the chuppah, right? Half an hour ago here. And you can't have a chuppah without mentioning all of those who are not at the chuppot. And you can't have a chuppah today without, we used to say, Im eshkachechi Yerushalayim. Now we don't need to be reminded. It's a constant part of who we are, that having a wedding today is reminding ourselves of the hostages. Having anything that we do today is knowing that there's soldiers out there putting their lives on the line for us at this moment. Everything that we do is knowing that there's Jewish people out there who are in challenging positions because they are out there standing for Israel. So that's another part of V'chia Muchachicha, is Kol Yisrael Arivim Ze Lezeh, that we all are there for each other. But I wanted to see one more. We have one more Midrash, which is a very nice story of Hillel. If we can go down. Yeah, let's go down to the English. Okay, another matter. Another matter means the Midrash takes another perspective or another angle at looking at understanding it. So it says davar acher. Davar acher means another thing that was said, that one of the rabbis said, another way of looking at it. So another matter. if we'll become poor, right? The pasuk that we are learning about what happens if someone becomes in an unequal state. So that is what is written. The man of kindness does good for himself. Again, from King Solomon. Who is this person? Who is the example? This is Hillel the elder. Right? Hillel was very famous. Many of us, we've heard of Hillel and Shammai. This is the older Hillel, right? There are two of them actually. Hillel the elder, who when he would take leave from his disciples would walk with them. His disciples said to him, "Our teacher, where are you going?" He said to them, "To perform a mitzvah." They said to him, what mitzvah is this? He said to them, "To bath in the bathhouse." So imagine you're walking out, you've just finished the Nordic Beit Midrash, and the rabbi starts walking with you, and you say, "Wait, where are you going?" Oh, he says, I'm going to do a mitzvah." First of all, the very fact, that's one thing that is worthwhile mentioning, that there is a mitzvah that when we have guests at our home, we should actually follow them out. It's very important in terms of caring for someone else, that they know that you follow. It's not like, bye, see you next. No, you walk out with the person, you show them respect, and you should also, right, it gives a good feeling to the person to know that you accompanying them as they walk out. So just mentioning that, so that in itself is a mitzvah that Hillel walked with his students. He didn't say, "Oh, I'm the teacher, they should walk out." He would walk with them. But then they said to him, "Where are you going?" He says, "To do a mitzvah." They said to him, "What mitzvah is this?" "I'm going to bath in the bathhouse." Imagine, right? You're walking with your rabbi. "Oh, where are you going?" "I'm going to do a mitzvah." "Where are you going?" "Oh, I'm going to the sauna." Right? Is that a mitzvah? They said, "What mitzvah is this?" You can say you're going to enjoy yourself. We have no problem, right, with our rabbi enjoying himself. But what is this? What mitzvah is this? So he said to them, right, "Yes, if the statues of kings that are placed in theaters and circuses, the one who is appointed over them scrubs them and washes them, and they provide him with sustenance. And moreover, he is exalted among the prominent leaders of the kingdom. I, who was created in the likeness and image of God, as it is written, for in the image of God he made man, all the more so." So I find it fascinating. First of all, Hillel is describing the bathhouse itself, because if anyone has seen Roman bathhouses, so they are full of statues, right, all over the place. The Roman bathhouses were full of depictions of statues of God, but then you have the person that is scrubbing them and washing them, right? And um, that is his example. So what is he saying here? He's right. So that person is provided with sustenance, and moreover, he's exalted among the prominent leaders of the kingdom. In other words, such a person has an exalted place. So he says, "I myself, who is created in the likeness and image of God, for in the image of God he made man, all the more so." Rav Shmuel, how do you understand this connection, and how does it prove us that there's a mitzvah here to go to the bathhouse? Is that actually a mitzvah?
Well, yeah, really interesting. I think there's a few things here. There is the relationship we have with our body. What is it exactly? Because it's a really interesting perspective. Because on the one hand, in Judaism we believe that the soul is sort of to say who we really are. God blew into our nostrils a soul, a neshama. After your death, the neshama stays forever. And during our whole life, we're sort of trying to connect to something more spiritual and not be guided just by our physical desires. At the same time, Judaism never neglects the body. In some other religions, perhaps body is seen as an evil or a necessary evil or something lowly that you start to subdue. But we see, well, the body is something natural. It's something your soul needs. The soul alone cannot do the mitzvot, so the body is needed, and it's important. And I think that's definitely a premise to start with when it comes to understanding this text. And then this is taking it a step further because it's saying, well, it's the image of God. And I think that's very interesting. What does it even mean here, the image of God? There's a lot of talk about that. Tselem Elohim. How is a human being an image of God? Here he's taking it very, very literally. That our physical body is somehow an image of God. And it's something that Hashem is proud of. And it's hard to understand. You often, the way the Maimonides, for example, understands the image of God is reflecting the soul and something, the human being as an idea and as a reality. It's here not specifically the physical face and bodily features. But I think here he seems to be taking on, well, this is the person, this is the human being, is what God has decided to exalt, and respecting it, looking after it, is a mitzvah, right? It's Hashem's will. We should take good care of it. We should clean it. It should look respectful. It should look nice. It should be hygienic. It should be healthy. So I think that's the idea. And I want to say in general, we often maybe misunderstand mitzvah, and we often think about mitzvot as some very holy gestures or ideas, almost a bit removed from everyday life. But actually, a life, a healthy, well-balanced life, where the body is given the attention it needs, the soul is given the attention it needs, that is a mitzvah, that is a life of mitzvot, that is completing God's will in this world. So that's just what my thoughts are on the first glance of this text.
I would just to add, I think it's interesting that and the point that you made is that it's very interesting because they're walking away from him, right? They just learned Torah together. He gave them a shiur. But so he says he doesn't want that distinction between the body and the soul to say, oh, we have our soul when we're learning with our rabbi, but then when we go to the sauna or we go to the bathhouse, that is purely the bodily, that's our body side. No, he says the two of them can connect. Don't think there's two worlds. There's one world of how you react. And I think in terms of the subject of this shiur, that's very important as well. Because it's not only I have a mitzvah now to give tzedakah, but rather the basic relations to the other, the caring for the other, to make sure the other feels, at home in many, many ways, like we said, is something that if we feel that responsibility, we can make sure that there's a way that that can be achieved, accomplished in many, many different ways. But I'd like to finish off here with the last midrash here. I'm going to skip over one because it's actually similar to the previous one. But let's just finish off with the last one. The man of kindness does good for himself, and one who abuses his flesh is cruel. Rabbi Alexandri said, this is one who has a reason to celebrate, but he does not invite his relatives to be with him due to poverty. Rabbi Nachman says it is written, for it is due to this matter. It is a cycle that recurs in the world. Therefore, Moses cautions them, imagine if someone is so poor that he's not even able to invite his relatives to be with him because he just has no ability. And this brings forward a whole question. In other words, what are the celebrations that we have and the fashion that we have them? And are they creating social standards that make it difficult, perhaps, for others to follow them? Or they maybe even feel forced to follow them and they don't have the money. I remember I was once at a wedding in Istanbul in the Jewish community. Friends of my wife, and she told me afterwards it was like one of the fanciest weddings I was ever at. And she told me afterwards they have no money, but they have no choice. And that is a terrible thing, that we could create social standards for others that make it very difficult for them, because otherwise they will be completely ashamed. But the reminder from the Midrash here is that this is, at the end, it's a galgal. This is like a wheel. It is a cycle. And that at one point you're at the top, and another point you're at the bottom. And that we always have to remember that in whatever state we are, that if we're at the bottom, to do our best and not to fall into depression, and know that we can pick ourselves up. And if we're at the top right now, to make sure that we care for others. So I think this was a very nice way to look at it, but there's a lot more to discuss about this and to think about in terms of our daily life, right? And as someone wrote in the chat room, it's very simple to talk about and much more difficult because it's about relations to every single person that we know, and how we can change that to so that we know that we are in a place in which we're actually caring for someone in each way. I think every person, like this last Midrash is hinting, we're all unequal in a certain sense, in a certain place that we are. And therefore we have to be so careful to make sure that we care for the other in whatever way possible. So I think there's, as always, there's much more to learn here. But it was, I think, beautiful midrashim, bringing out the essence in different ways of this idea of of equality from our relation to the land, our relation to the others through the land of the Shemitah, and then caring for the other in this pasuk that we have in this coming parasha, V'chiyamuch. So, that being said, Bezrat Hashem, I will go back to the Chatan and the Kala and leave you all to enjoy. And Shabbat Shalom. And Bezrat Hashem, I'll see some of you this Shabbat in Copenhagen. So that's wonderful. And see each other. And anyone not there, will continue to see each other here at least. So Shabbat Shalom, and Bezrat Hashem, only good news for Am Yisrael. Am Yisrael
Shabbat
Chai.
Shalom. Shabbat Shalom.
Bye.
Uh,
Bye bye.